Look at what you're facing head-on not as an obstacle, but as raw material waiting to be shaped into something greater. That's the essence of a line from Marcus Aurelius, who wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. Think about that for a moment. The very thing that seems to block your path, it's not just a test of endurance, it's the forge where ambition is tempered into something unbreakable. This isn't about gritting your teeth and surviving adversity. It's about dominating it, turning every setback into a stepping stone, and emerging stronger on the other side. That's the heart of Stoicism, and it's why this philosophy has guided emperors, entrepreneurs, and everyday warriors for thousands of years. So what does it mean to truly dominate adversity? It's not just resilience, it's a radical shift in perception. Most people see challenges as things to endure. Stoics see them as opportunities to evolve. Imagine two people hit by the same storm. One builds a shelter, the other learns to sail. The difference isn't luck or talent, it's how they choose to interpret the storm. That's the first Stoic superpower we'll explore, the ability to reframe any situation, not as a threat, but as fuel for growth, because the obstacles in your life, they're not here to break you, they're here to reveal what you're capable of. This video is about unlocking that mindset. We'll dive into the three core Stoic principles of perception, action, and will that turn adversity into advantage. You'll learn how to spot hidden opportunities in chaos, take purposeful steps when others freeze, and cultivate an unshakable inner drive that thrives under pressure. This isn't theoretical. It's a battle-tested system for ambitious people who refuse to let circumstances dictate their limits. Whether you're facing a personal struggle, a professional roadblock, or simply want to build a life of relentless forward motion, these tools will change how you engage with every challenge. The storm isn't going away, but after today, you'll know exactly how to ride it. The first tool in the Stoic arsenal isn't about changing the world. It's about changing how you see it. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of history's greatest philosophers, put it bluntly, "It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them." Think of adversity like a blank canvas. The colors you choose, fear, frustration, or curiosity, determine whether it becomes a masterpiece or a mess. A missed promotion isn't inherently devastating. A failed project isn't automatically a disaster. These events are neutral until your mind assigns them meaning. That's the Stoic lens of perception, the quiet recognition that you hold the brush. Take a modern example, an entrepreneur whose product launch flops. Most would see disaster, but through the Stoic lens, it's data, feedback, a chance to refine. The event itself didn't change, only the interpretation did. This shift isn't naive optimism, it's strategic clarity. When you strip away the emotional charge, what's left is raw information you can use. Now apply this to your life. Recall a recent setback, a rejection, a mistake, a plan gone sideways. How did you frame it? As a dead end or a detour? The Stoic challenge is simple: rewrite the narrative. What if that obstacle was secretly a shortcut? What if that frustration was fuel? Perception isn't just about seeing clearly, it's about seeing opportunistically. Because when you stop labeling storms as bad luck, you start noticing the wind at your back. The most liberating truth in Stoicism is also the simplest. Some things are in your hands and some aren't. Epictetus called this the Dichotomy of Control, a razor-sharp distinction between what you can change and what you must accept. Picture a ship's captain. She can't command the wind, but she can adjust the sails. That's the Stoic mindset in action, pouring your energy into the rudder, not railing against the storm. Modern life bombards us with the illusion of control, especially over things that don't belong to us. Social media likes other people's opinions, the stock market swings. We chase these like they're lifelines, mistaking influence for agency. But here's the pivot. Real power begins when you stop confusing the two. An athlete can't control the referee's call, but they can control their next move. A writer can't force a bestseller, but they can show up at the desk every morning. The moment you stop wrestling with the uncontrollable, you free up reserves of focus for what actually matters. Try this exercise right now. Grab a sheet of paper and draw a line down the center. On the left, list everything about a current challenge that's outside your control: the economy, a boss's mood, yesterday's mistakes. On the right, write what you can control: your preparation, your attitude, the effort you give today. That blank right column, that's your battlefield. As Epictetus put it, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. This isn't about surrender, it's about strategy. Think of a gardener. They don't waste energy cursing the weather, they adapt to it. Too much rain, they build better drainage. A drought, they plant resilient seeds. The garden thrives not because conditions were perfect, but because the gardener knew where to dig. Your life works the same way. When you stop pouring energy into the left column, the opinions, the past, the unpredictability of others, you'll uncover a startling truth. You've always had more influence than you realized. The key was just knowing where to look. Now let's talk about loving what life throws at you, not just enduring it, but embracing it with open arms. This is the heart of Amor Fati, a concept borrowed from Stoicism by Friedrich Nietzsche, who called it his formula for greatness. It means love of fate, the radical acceptance that everything happening to you, even the setbacks, is part of the raw material for your growth. Think of it as mental alchemy, taking the lead of hardship and turning it into the gold of opportunity. History gives us a masterclass in this with Seneca. When the Roman Emperor Claudius exiled him to Corsica, a bleak, remote island, Seneca didn't crumble. He doubled down. He wrote some of his most profound works there, refining Stoic philosophy in the very place meant to break him. His exile wasn't a punishment, it became his workshop. That's Amor Fati in action, recognizing that the twists of fate aren't interruptions to your journey, they are the journey. Here's the challenge for you. Find one thing in your life right now that feels like a burden, a setback, a limitation, an inconvenience. Maybe it's a job you didn't want, a plan that fell through, or a relationship that didn't work out. Now ask, what if this wasn't happening to you but for you? What hidden advantage could it hold? A delayed project might force you to innovate. A rejection might redirect you to something better. Even pain can be a teacher if you're willing to listen. This isn't about blind positivity. It's about shifting from resistance to curiosity. The Stoics didn't preach passive acceptance. They practiced active engagement with reality. When you stop fighting what is, you start seeing what could be. So today, pick one thing, just one, and experiment with Amor Fati. Look at it with fresh eyes. Where's the hidden edge, the unexpected lesson, the chance to build resilience? Fate isn't your enemy, it's your co-author. And the story gets far more interesting when you stop trying to rewrite the pages and start loving the plot. Here's where Stoics flip conventional wisdom on its head. They don't just prepare for success, they rehearse for failure. It's called premeditatio malorum, the deliberate practice of anticipating adversity before it arrives. Picture a fire drill for the mind. Seneca wrote letters urging his friends to do this daily, not out of pessimism, but as a mental armor against life's unpredictability. He'd ask himself, what if I lose my wealth? What if my reputation is shattered? Not to dwell on fear, but to disarm it. Because here's the secret. when you've already walked through the worst-case scenario in your mind, its power to shock you in reality vanishes. Think of it like a chess grandmaster. They don't just plan their own moves, they anticipate their opponents. That's negative visualization, playing out life's challenges before they happen so you're never caught off guard. Modern psychology backs this up. Studies show that people who mentally rehearse setbacks recover faster because their brains have already mapped the terrain. Try this tomorrow morning. Before you check your phone before coffee, take 5 minutes. Close your eyes and ask, what could go wrong today? Maybe it's a missed deadline, a difficult conversation, or a project derailing. Now visualize yourself responding with calm precision. See yourself adapting, problem-solving, staying anchored. That mental rehearsal does two things. It reduces the sting of surprise, and it reveals hidden solutions you'd miss in the heat of the moment. Seneca took this further. He'd actually live out his fears in small doses, wearing rough clothing to remember poverty, fasting to recall hunger. Not to punish himself, but to prove one vital truth: you can endure far more than you think. Today's version might look like turning off notifications to practice focus, or taking the stairs when the elevator's crowded to embrace discomfort. The goal isn't to invite suffering, but to expose the lie that you need perfect conditions to thrive. So here's your challenge. Pick one thing you're avoiding because it feels too uncertain. A hard conversation, a career leap, a personal risk. Now spend 3 minutes envisioning the worst that could happen. Did you survive? Did you learn? Chances are the monster under the bed looks smaller once you shine a light on it. That's the gift of premeditatio malorum. It doesn't just prepare you for storms, it teaches you to dance in the rain. Marcus Aurelius left us a treasure in his private journal pages, filled not with boasts of imperial conquests, but with raw reminders to himself about the alchemy of adversity. One entry cuts straight to the bone. The obstacle in the path becomes the path. Never forget that within every barrier is an equal or greater benefit. This wasn't philosophical fluff. It was battle-tested wisdom from a man who ruled an empire during plague, war, and betrayal. His insight: what looks like a roadblock is often a redirect, a signpost pointing you toward uncharted territory you were meant to explore. Take the story of Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx. Her early career was a string of closed doors, rejected from law school, working fax machine sales at Disney World. But when she cut the feet off her pantyhose to create smoother lines under white pants, she didn't see a fashion hack. She saw the solution to a problem others ignored. That obstacle of ill-fitting undergarments, it became a billion-dollar path because she asked the Stoic question: what if this isn't a dead end but raw material? Here's the pivot most miss. Barriers don't just test us, they train us. Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps' coach deliberately sabotaged his goggles during practice, filling them with water so he'd learn to count strokes blind. When his goggles actually failed in the Beijing Olympics, Phelps didn't panic. He'd already turned that obstacle into his secret weapon. That's the Aurelian mindset, drilling in the dark so you can perform under any conditions. Now bring this home. Grab your phone and open your notes app. Write down one current obstacle: the project that stalled, the skill you haven't mastered, the rejection that stung. Now attack it with these 3 questions. First, how could this barrier be protecting me from something worse? A failed deal might have saved you from a toxic partnership. Second, what muscle is this forcing me to develop? A tight budget breeds creativity. Third, if this obstacle were deliberately placed in my path as training, what's it preparing me for? That shift from victim to student changes everything. Because here's the truth every Stoic knew: smooth seas never made skilled sailors. The reason you're facing this challenge right now isn't random, it's relevant. The universe has a funny way of giving us exactly the resistance we need to level up. So next time you hit that wall, don't just look for a way around it. Lean in and listen. It's probably whispering directions to somewhere you're meant to go. Stoicism was never about sitting quietly with folded hands. It's about moving forward with calloused ones. Take Cleans, who carried water by night to fund his philosophy studies by day. While others slept, he worked. While others complained about lack of time, he created it. That's the discipline of action in its rawest form, the understanding that wisdom without exertion is just daydreaming. The Stoics didn't glorify suffering, they weaponized effort. Every drop of sweat was a choice, every callus a badge of honor. Here's where modern hustle culture gets it wrong. Hustle for its own sake is just motion. Stoic action is different, it's targeted, intentional, almost surgical. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be." Be one, that's the heart of it, not endless planning, not perfect conditions, but the courage to begin where you stand. Think of an archer. They can control their stance, their aim, their release, but never the wind. Stoic action is about perfecting what's in your hands while accepting what isn't. Now bring this into your life. There's something you've been putting off, a conversation, a career move, a creative project, not because you lack time, but because you've been waiting for the fear to subside. Here's the secret the Stoics knew. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that what you're moving toward matters more than what you're afraid of. Cleans didn't wait for inspiration to strike while hauling those water jars. He found purpose in the strain itself. So let's make this concrete. Grab a pen and write down one action you've avoided, the kind that tightens your chest just thinking about it. Maybe it's asking for that raise, ending a toxic relationship, or finally launching the side hustle. Now circle it. This isn't just a task, it's your training ground. The Stoics would tell you that discomfort is the exact compass point you need, because growth never happens in the safe zone, it happens in the stretch. Your challenge starts now. Don't wait for motivation, don't wait for courage. Do the thing while the fear is still fresh. That water won't carry itself. Cato the Younger didn't just tolerate discomfort, he courted it. The Roman statesman would walk through Rome barefoot in winter, wear coarse tunics when fine robes were expected, and deliberately expose himself to hunger and thirst. This wasn't masochism. It was a masterclass in Stoic resilience, training his body and mind to remember that comfort is a choice, not a necessity. Modern science calls this stress inoculation. The Stoics called it wisdom. They understood something profound. The more you voluntarily embrace life's edges, the less life's edges control you. Think of it like a vaccine. A tiny, controlled dose of hardship builds antibodies against despair when real storms hit. Naval officer James Stockdale, shot down over Vietnam and held as a POW for 7 years, credited his survival to Stoic principles. He'd prepared by reading Epictetus, who wrote, "Difficulties show what men are." Stockdale later said his prison cell was where philosophy stopped being theoretical. His voluntary training, mental and physical, before capture meant he could endure torture without breaking. That's the power of deliberate discomfort. It doesn't just harden you, it frees you. Now let's make this practical. You don't need to sleep on stone floors like Cato, but you can start small. Take cold showers, skip the elevator, fast for 12 hours. These aren't punishments, they're rehearsals. Every time you choose discomfort over convenience, you're rewiring your brain's relationship with adversity. A study at the University of California found that people who regularly practiced voluntary hardship, like sleeping on the floor or taking ice baths, reported higher stress tolerance in daily life. Their threshold for suffering didn't shrink, their capacity for joy expanded. Here's the twist most miss. discomfort isn't the enemy of happiness, it's the antidote to fragility. The entrepreneur who budgets like they're broke even when profits soar, the athlete who trains in the rain, the parent who says no to their child and themselves to build character. These are all versions of the same Stoic exercise, proving to yourself that you can thrive with less. So here's your challenge this week. Pick one comfort, your morning latte, the thermostat setting, the snooze button, and deliberately disrupt it. Not to suffer, but to discover how much of your peace depends on things going exactly your way, because resilience isn't something you find in the storm. It's something you build in the calm, and the person who can stand in a cold shower for 3 minutes, that's the same person who will stand tall when life turns icy. The Stoics had a practice that might sound morbid at first, but it's one of the most liberating tools for ambition. Memento Mori, the art of remembering you will die. Far from being a dark obsession, this was their secret weapon for living with urgency and purpose. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. That's not a threat, it's a wake-up call. When you truly internalize that your time is finite, every moment becomes too precious to waste on distractions, half-hearted efforts, or waiting for someday. Consider how Steve Jobs famously framed it after his cancer diagnosis. "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." He wasn't paralyzed by mortality, he was propelled by it. That's the paradox of Memento Mori. Confronting death doesn't shrink your life, it expands it. The ticking clock isn't your enemy, it's your most honest advisor. Here's the exercise the Stoics used, one you can try right now. Grab a notebook and write down this question. If I had 1 year left to live, what would I start, stop, or change? Not as a hypothetical, but as if the clock is genuinely running. You'll notice something fascinating. The trivial falls away instantly. Petty arguments, approval-seeking, procrastination, none of it makes the cut. What remains are the things that actually matter, the relationships you'd deepen, the work you'd finally create, the adventures you'd stop postponing. That list isn't morbid, it's a blueprint for living with your eyes wide open. History's most impactful figures, from Leonardo da Vinci to Marie Curie, lived with this awareness. They didn't just manage time, they honored it. Da Vinci's notebooks overflowed with unfinished inventions because he knew his days were limited. Every stroke of his brush, every sketch in his journal was a rebellion against complacency. That's the fire Memento Mori ignites, not fear, but fierce clarity. So here's your challenge today. Carry this question with you. Is this how I'd spend my time if I knew it was running out? Let it sharpen your focus at work, soften your impatience in traffic, and silence the noise of other people's expectations. Because when you stop pretending you have forever, you start acting like you have something better, a life that's alive right now. The Stoics weren't preparing for death, they were practicing how to truly live. Imagine your boss just criticized your work in front of the team. Your face flushes, your pulse quickens. The words are halfway out of your mouth before you even think them. Now freeze that moment. Right there, in the space between trigger and reaction, is where Stoics build their fortress. Epictetus called it the Discipline of Assent, that critical pause where you decide whether to fuel the fire or let it pass. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. That heartbeat of hesitation, that's your secret weapon." Consider the last time you regretted something said in anger. What if you'd taken just 10 seconds to breathe, to step back, to see the bigger picture? History remembers Abraham Lincoln for this exact practice. He'd write hot letters to vent his frustration, then stash them in his desk unsent. The anger was real, but the response was deliberate. That's the Stoic pause in action, creating distance between emotion and action so wisdom, not heat, guides your next move. Here's how to train this muscle today. Next time your phone pings with a frustrating text, don't reply immediately. Set it down, walk around the block. The modern world runs on instant reactions, but Stoics operate in the power of the interval. A study from the University of Michigan found that even a 90-second pause lowers cortisol levels enough to shift from reactive to reflective thinking. That's all it takes: 90 seconds to change a career-ending email into a constructive conversation. Try this tonight. Replay a recent moment when emotions hijacked you. Maybe it was a snarky comment from a colleague or your teenager's eye roll. Now rewrite the script. What if you'd pause to ask Epictetus 3 questions? Is this within my control? What's the worst that could happen? What would my best self do? That mental timeout isn't passivity, it's the ultimate power move. Because when you stop being a puppet to every passing emotion, you start becoming the architect of your life. The pause is where ordinary people become philosophers. It's the difference between the driver who leans on the horn and the one who adjusts the mirror. Both see the same traffic, only one remembers their steering. Your emotions aren't the enemy, but left unchecked, they're terrible navigators. Master the pause, and you master the art of response. Marcus Aurelius never intended his journals for publication. Those private pages, now known as meditations, were his battlefield where he reforged chaos into clarity every morning. Picture the most powerful man in Rome, ruler of an empire stretching from Britain to Babylon, sitting by candlelight to wrestle with his own humanity. That's the raw power of Stoic journaling, not just recording events, but sculpting your character through ink and intention. His entries weren't poetic musings. They were drills, mental repetitions to anchor himself before storms hit. When you arise in the morning, he wrote, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. That wasn't inspiration, it was preparation. Here's the 3-question template Aurelius used, one you can steal today. First, what went well? Not generic gratitude, but forensic recognition of specific victories. Maybe you held your temper during a provocation or spotted an opportunity others missed. The Stoics called this harvesting, actively collecting evidence of growth. Second, what could improve? Not self-flagellation, but clear-eyed assessment. Did you waste energy on things outside your control? Did fear masquerade as caution? Third, the keystone. What's within my control tomorrow? This shifts you from spectator to architect. Aurelius would map his responses like a general planning a campaign. Today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, but I cannot be angry with my fellow creatures, for we are made for cooperation. Modern science backs this practice. Harvard researchers found that just 15 minutes of structured journaling boosts emotional regulation by 23%. Why? Because writing forces your brain to move from the amygdala's chaos to the prefrontal cortex's clarity. Think of it as cognitive defragmentation, organizing scattered thoughts into actionable wisdom. Try this tonight. Grab any notebook, no fancy tools needed. Set a 3-minute timer and answer those 3 questions with brutal simplicity. No essays, just bullet points. Over time, you'll spot patterns. Maybe Mondays trigger defensive reactions, or certain people consistently appear in your "what could improve" column. That's not failure, it's data. The Stoics didn't journal to dwell, they journaled to act. Your notebook isn't a confessional. It's a workshop where you forge better versions of yourself, one honest line at a time. The magic happens when this practice becomes habitual. Naval Admiral James Stockdale, imprisoned in Vietnam, scratched Stoic principles on toilet paper with a nail. No journals, he created them, because the act of writing isn't about the page, it's about the pause. That moment when pen meets paper is where emotions slow just enough for wisdom to catch up. Your challenge starts now. Don't wait for perfect conditions. The barista's napkin, your phone's notes app, a receipt in your pocket, any surface can hold the words that steady your soul. As Seneca warned, no one confines his unhappiness to the present. But with these 3 questions you can. Ambition without boundaries is like a fire without a hearth. It might blaze brightly, but it risks consuming everything in its path. That's where the Stoic virtue of temperance comes in, not as a restraint on your drive, but as its guiding compass. Seneca put it bluntly, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more." Think about that for a moment. The Stoics weren't against ambition. They were against the kind of unchecked hunger that turns achievement into an endless chase. True growth isn't about accumulating more. It's about refining what matters. Take Seneca's own life. As one of Rome's wealthiest men, he could have indulged in every luxury. Instead, he practiced voluntary simplicity, eating plain food, wearing modest clothing, and regularly giving away fortunes. Why? Because he knew desire expands to fill whatever space you give it. Modern research echoes this. A Yale study found that once basic needs are met, additional wealth rarely increases happiness. What does move the needle? Intentionality. The difference between a Stoic and a workaholic isn't effort, it's awareness. One burns out chasing external validation. The other builds sustainably by aligning actions with purpose. Here's the tension we all face. Society rewards excess, longer hours, bigger purchases, louder opinions, but the Stoics whispered a counterintuitive truth. Mastery lies in knowing when to say enough. Picture a blacksmith shaping steel. The metal doesn't improve from endless hammering. It improves from precise, measured strikes. Your ambitions work the same way. Relentless hustle might get you somewhere, but temperance ensures it's somewhere you actually want to be. So let's make this practical. Pick one area of your life where excess has crept in. Maybe it's screen time, spending, or even self-criticism. Now channel Seneca by asking 3 questions. First, is this serving my growth or just feeding a habit? Second, what would a 10% reduction look like? Third, what hidden cost am I ignoring? Temperance isn't about deprivation, it's about recalibration. The athlete who trains smarter, not longer. The leader who delegates instead of micromanaging. The artist who steps back to see the whole canvas. This week, try a Stoic audit. For 3 days, track that one area of excess like a scientist observing an experiment. No judgment, just data. You'll likely spot a pattern. The moments you reach for more are often the moments you feel least grounded. That's temperance whispering to you. Not stop, but choose, because the real power of ambition isn't in how much you can take, it's in how wisely you can let go. The Stoics didn't just study philosophy, they studied people. Real flesh and blood exemplars whose lives became living textbooks of virtue. Marcus Aurelius kept portraits of his mentors in his bedroom, not as decoration, but as daily reminders of the standards he aspired to. When he faced impossible decisions as emperor, he'd ask himself, what would Antoninus do? That's the power of role models in Stoic practice. They're not idols to worship, but compasses to orient by. Take Socrates, the original Stoic hero. He didn't leave behind grand treatises or political conquests. His legacy was a single question: how should one live? By drinking the hemlock rather than betray his principles, he gave the Stoics something no textbook could: a visceral example of integrity that outlasts death. Centuries later, Epictetus would tell his students, "You can chain my leg, but not my will. Not even Zeus can conquer that." He wasn't theorizing, he was channeling Socrates' unbreakable spirit. Then there's Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who became Stoicism's North Star. When Julius Caesar offered him clemency after civil war, Cato chose suicide over surrender. Extreme, perhaps, but to the Stoics, his refusal to compromise his republicanism, even in defeat, showed what consistency looks like at the cliff's edge. Seneca wrote that Cato's life was a draft for others to emulate, proving that role models aren't about copying actions, but internalizing the convictions behind them. Here's where modern practice comes in. You don't need ancient heroes, though they help. Biographies are your excavation sites. Read about Mandela's patience on Robben Island or Lincoln's humility during the Civil War. Watch documentaries on Marie Curie's relentless curiosity or Kobe Bryant's obsessive work ethic. The key isn't to mimic their paths, but to reverse engineer their traits. When Naval Ravikant describes how he reads biographies to collect mental models, he's doing pure Stoicism, harvesting virtues like apples from others' orchards. Try this exercise today. Grab a notebook and divide a page into 3 columns. In the first, list 5 people, historical or contemporary, who embody traits you admire. Maybe it's your grandmother's resilience or Brené Brown's courage. In the second column, name the specific qualities that draw you to them. Perhaps Churchill's wit under pressure or Frida Kahlo's ability to create through pain. The third column is where Stoic alchemy happens. How can I cultivate this trait in my current circumstances? If you admire Serena Williams' discipline, what does that look like in your morning routine? If you're drawn to Mr. Rogers' kindness, how does that translate to your next team meeting? The Stoics knew something modern psychology confirms. We absorb the values of those we study. A Harvard study found that hospital janitors who framed their work as healing rather than cleaning showed higher job satisfaction. They'd unconsciously adopted the mindset of the doctors around them. That's the hidden power of role models. They don't just inspire action, they reshape identity. So don't just collect heroes, converse with them. When facing a tough decision, ask, what would Michelle Obama do here? When procrastinating, picture David Goggins glaring at you. These mental dialogues aren't fantasy. They're deliberate rehearsals for becoming who you're capable of being. As Seneca wrote to his protege Lucilius, choose someone whose way of life approves itself to you and whose words and actions match. Then watch how their light starts reflecting in your own. Zeno of Citium wasn't looking for philosophy when his merchant ship sank off the coast of Athens. He was just trying to survive. Stranded with nothing but the clothes on his back, he wandered into a bookshop and stumbled upon Xenophon's writings about Socrates. That shipwreck cost him his cargo, but it gave him something far more valuable, a new compass for life. What seemed like catastrophe became the turning point where Zeno stopped chasing short-term gains and started building Stoicism, a philosophy that would outlast empires. That's the power of the long view, the ability to see beyond immediate losses and recognize the invisible threads of opportunity woven through adversity. Modern culture obsesses over quick fixes, crash diets promising results in 30 days, get rich quick schemes, and viral fame overnight. But the Stoics measured progress in decades, not days. Seneca wrote letters advising his friend Lucilius to persist and persevere through slow, unglamorous growth, comparing self-improvement to a tree that matures unseen until its roots are unshakable. There's a reason Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily. You've wandered all over and finally realized you never found what you were after the life according to nature. Not in logic chopping, not in wealth, not in fame. Where then, in doing what human nature demands, that demand to plant seeds you may never sit under. Here's the exercise the Stoics used, one you can apply right now. Project yourself 5 years into the future, not with vague wishes but with forensic detail. What does your ideal day look like? What skills have you mastered? What relationships thrive? Now work backward. What must you start doing or stop doing today to make that vision inevitable? When SpaceX engineers plan Mars missions, they don't begin with rocket designs. They use backward planning, identifying every milestone between now and liftoff. Your life deserves the same precision. Consider the Japanese concept of ikigai, the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Finding it isn't a lightning strike, it's a long excavation. Jiro Ono, the sushi master featured in Jiro Dreams of Sushi, spent 75 years refining a single craft. His apprentices trained for a decade before touching fish. That's Stoic patience in action, the recognition that mastery isn't a sprint, but a series of deliberate steps where most quit before the third mile. So here's your challenge. Grab a notebook and divide a page into 2 columns. Label the left side, 5 years from now. Fill it with specifics, the language you'll speak fluently, the business you'll have launched, the health metrics you'll maintain. The right column, this quarter, list the 3 daily or weekly actions that will compound toward that vision. Maybe it's 30 minutes of Spanish study or 1 hard conversation you've avoided. The gap between these columns isn't a void, it's your blueprint. Because while the world chases shortcuts, the Stoic knows, real growth happens in the space between planting and harvest, when no one's watching. Zeno's shipwreck didn't just change his life, it changed history. What looks like your obstacle today might be the current carrying you exactly where you need to go. The question isn't whether you'll face storms, but whether you'll let them blow you off course or steer you to uncharted shores. Set your coordinates far ahead, and even the roughest seas become part of the journey. Marcus Aurelius had a blunt reminder for himself whenever he felt the sting of criticism or the flush of praise. It makes no difference whether people praise you or not. You still have your own work to do. Think about the weight of that statement coming from a Roman emperor, a man whose every decision was scrutinized by millions. He wasn't dismissing feedback, he was drawing a line between constructive input and the noise of others' fleeting judgments. That's the Stoic art of indifference, not apathy, but immunity to the emotional roller coaster of external validation. Consider the athlete who trains in silence for years before the world notices, or the artist who keeps painting despite gallery rejections. Their power doesn't come from ignoring opinions, it comes from prioritizing their internal compass. Epictetus, born a slave, put it even sharper. If someone told you that others spoke ill of you, don't defend yourself but reply, "They must not know my other faults, or they would have mentioned those too." That's the paradox. The less you armor yourself against blame, the freer you become to improve. Here's the modern trap we all face. Social media turns praise and blame into a currency, likes as approval, comments as verdicts, but the Stoics would have spotted the flaw. When you outsource your self-worth to strangers' thumbs, you're no longer the author of your life. A Stanford study found that people who based their happiness on external validation experienced cortisol spikes 3 times higher when facing criticism. Compare that to those anchored in internal standards, their stress levels barely budged. That's not resilience, that's rewiring. So let's make this practical. Your challenge today is simple but revealing. Do 1 meaningful thing and tell no one. Write a poem and don't post it. Fix something broken without before and after photos. Help a colleague anonymously. The act itself isn't the test, it's sitting with the discomfort of unseen effort. You'll quickly notice how often we conflate achievement with recognition. Marcus called this the athlete's error, a mistaking the roar of the crowd for the worth of the workout. History's most enduring work often began in obscurity. Van Gogh sold 1 painting in his lifetime. Emily Dickinson wrote nearly 2,000 poems locked in her drawer. Their legacy wasn't built on applause. It was built on the quiet certainty that their work mattered, regardless of audience. That's the Stoic secret. When you stop measuring your worth by external meters, you start creating what truly resonates, not for the world's echo, but for your own unshakable knowing. So next time you feel the pull to perform for others, ask Marcus' question. What's left if you strip away the applause? The answer isn't emptiness. It's the raw, untamed version of your work that exists simply because it must. And that, far beyond the fickle opinions of others, is where real mastery begins. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who was exiled 4 times for speaking truth to power, had a radical definition of success. What profit is there in gaining the whole world when you lose your own integrity? That question cuts through 20 centuries of noise about wealth, fame, and external validation. The Stoics weren't against achievement, they were against letting achievement define you. Picture 2 mountain climbers, one summits with broken ropes and abandoned teammates. The other turns back 50 feet from the top to save a struggling companion. Who truly succeeded? That's the Stoic test, not what you gain, but who you become in the process. Modern culture conflates success with visibility, bank balances, follower counts, job titles. But history remembers people like inventor Nikola Tesla, who died penniless in a hotel room yet transformed civilization with his ideas, or teacher Marva Collins, who rejected celebrity to tutor struggling students in her living room. Their legacy wasn't measured in metrics, but in the quiet impact of lives changed. Seneca warned about this trap. A man is as poor as he is greedy. Because when you anchor your worth to external milestones, you sentence yourself to endless hunger. Here's the exercise that flips the script. Grab a notebook and divide a page into 2 columns. Label the first, what the world calls success. List the conventional markers your industry or social circle celebrates. The second column, what would make me proud at 80? That's where Stoic clarity emerges. Maybe it's raising kind children rather than perfect students, building a business that treats employees well, not just one that scales fast. Learning to listen instead of always needing to be heard. The gap between these columns isn't failure, it's freedom. Consider James Stockdale again, the POW who survived by measuring his days not in meals received or torture avoided, but in small acts of resistance, a tapped code to a fellow prisoner, a silent recitation of Epictetus. His captors controlled every external condition, yet he remained successful by the only standard that mattered, staying unbroken. That's the Stoic breakthrough. When you stop letting the world grade your paper, you start writing your own questions. Tonight, try this ritual. Light a candle and ask yourself Musonius' question, not as philosophy, but as fire. What am I trading my integrity for? Not to shame your ambitions, but to purify them, because real success isn't something you chase. It's something you carry, and no one can take that from you, not a bad quarter, not a failed relationship, not even exile. The emperor and the exile share the same sky. The only difference is how they choose to see it. Seneca ended every day with a ritual more powerful than any morning routine, a practice he called his evening reckoning. Picture this, the candle burns low as Rome sleeps outside his window, and with deliberate strokes of his pen, he dissects the day not with regret, but with the precision of a surgeon studying anatomy. The soul should be called to account every day, he wrote to his friend Lucilius. This wasn't self-judgment, it was strategic refinement. The Stoics understood something neuroscience now confirms. Growth doesn't happen in the heat of the moment, but in the quiet space afterward where we extract wisdom from experience. Start with Seneca's first question. What did I do well today? Not generic gratitude, but forensic recognition of specific victories. Maybe you held your tongue during a provocation, spotted an opportunity others missed, or chose the harder right over the easier wrong. The Stoics called this harvesting, actively collecting evidence of progress. Modern research from the University of Pennsylvania shows people who journal small wins daily increase their resilience by 31% in just 3 weeks. Why? Because the brain learns to spot patterns of strength it would otherwise overlook. Now the tougher cut. Where did I falter? Notice the phrasing, not fail, but falter. This isn't about self-flagellation, it's about identifying friction points. Did you waste energy on things outside your control? Did fear disguise itself as practicality? Seneca would examine his actions like a general reviewing battle maps, not to punish himself, but to adjust tactics. A study in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that professionals who analyzed daily setbacks with curiosity rather than shame were 23% more likely to overcome similar challenges later. The final question transforms reflection into momentum. How can I improve tomorrow? Here's where most people stumble. They mistake insight for action. Seneca didn't just note his shortcomings, he designed interventions. If he'd been impatient with a servant, he'd planned to pause 3 seconds before speaking the next day. Modern equivalents might look like setting a phone reminder to breathe before answering emails, or leaving running shoes by the bed to outwit morning resistance. Consistency is the hinge this practice swings on. Roman Stoics didn't wait for dramatic failures to course correct. They adjusted their sails daily. Think of it like brushing your teeth for the mind. Skipping one session won't crater your progress, but the compound effect of regular maintenance is undeniable. Behavioral scientist B.J. Fogg's research at Stanford reveals that habits sticking to existing routines, like journaling right after dinner, increase adherence by 40%. Tonight, try this stripped-down version. Grab any notebook, fancy tools aren't required. Set a 3-minute timer and answer those 3 questions with brutal simplicity. No essays, just bullet points. Over time, you'll notice something profound. The same challenges keep appearing in your falter column until you finally address their root. That delayed project isn't about time management, it's about fear of judgment. That snapped comment isn't about the other person, it's about your unresolved stress. The evening review doesn't just document your days, it decodes them. Seneca's final touch, he'd often write a short letter to his future self, not with grand advice, but with specific reminders. You laughed too loudly at the consul's joke today. Was that truly amusing, or were you seeking approval? That's the gift of this practice. It turns hindsight into foresight. Because the person who honestly assesses yesterday's storms becomes the one who navigates tomorrow's with steady hands. Here's a truth the most effective people understand instinctively. Not all battles are worth fighting. The Stoics knew this 2,000 years before Stephen Covey coined the term circle of influence. Picture a target with 3 rings. The outermost ring contains everything outside your control: the weather, traffic, other people's choices. The middle ring holds things you can influence but not dictate: team morale, project timelines, personal health. The bullseye, that's your absolute control, your thoughts, actions, and reactions. Most people exhaust themselves shooting arrows at the outer rings while their center gathers dust. Take a typical workday. You can't control a client's last-minute changes outer ring, but you can control how quickly you adapt your strategy, bullseye. You might influence a colleague's attitude by modeling calm professionalism, middle ring, but you'll never dictate their mood. The wasted energy comes from blurring these lines, arguing with reality instead of working with it. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire during plague and war by focusing relentlessly on that center ring. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Here's the practical shift. For the next 3 days, carry a small notebook. Each time you feel frustration rising, note whether the trigger falls in your circle of control, influence, or neither. You'll likely spot patterns. Maybe you're agonizing over a family member's choices outer ring while neglecting your own sleep schedule bullseye. One executive client discovered 70% of her stress came from outer ring concerns. Her solution, a literal "not my circus" folder for emails about issues she couldn't affect. Now the challenge: eliminate one influence drain this week. That might mean muting a news channel that fuels helpless anger outer ring, or delegating tasks you micromanage middle ring. When entrepreneur Derek Sivers stopped attending industry parties to please others, he found 30 extra hours a month for meaningful work. Time is your most finite resource. Why spend it wrestling ghosts? The Stoic version of Covey's circles isn't about resignation. It's about precision. Like a sculptor chiseling away excess marble to reveal the form within, trimming your focus reveals hidden capacity. The historian Will Durant summarized it perfectly. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit, and habits grow strongest in the fertile soil of intentional attention. So pick up your chisel. That outer ring will always exist, but your masterpiece is waiting in the center. Failure doesn't mean you're broken, it means you're being forged. That's the Stoic reframe hiding in plain sight. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into a masterclass on inner freedom, gave us an image that cuts through centuries of failure myths: the archer. Picture this: a bow drawn, eyes locked on the target, every muscle taut with intention. The archer's job isn't to control the wind or guarantee the arrow's flight. It's to aim true, release with skill, and accept whatever follows. For the archer, Epictetus wrote, the good lies in doing all within his power, not in hitting the mark. That subtle shift changes everything. When you stop measuring success by outcomes you can't fully control and start measuring it by the quality of your effort, failure loses its fangs. Consider Thomas Edison's famous line about inventing the light bulb. I didn't fail, I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. Most people miss the Stoic genius in that statement. Edison wasn't spinning defeat into positivity. He was treating each failure as pure data. Like a scientist adjusting variables, he understood that what others called setbacks were actually directional signals. Modern psychology confirms this. A Harvard study found that people who view failure as information rather than identity recover 3 times faster and innovate more effectively. Here's where most of us get stuck. We conflate the arrow's path with the archer's worth. A rejected proposal becomes proof you're not cut out for the job. A missed promotion becomes evidence you're falling behind. But the Stoics would ask, did you prepare thoroughly? Did you act with integrity? Did you learn something that sharpens your next attempt? If so, the outcome, whether applause or silence, is just weather passing through. Try this reframe today. Think of a recent failure, maybe a project that flopped or a conversation that backfired. Now dissect it like a Stoic scientist. What worked, what didn't, not to assign blame, but to isolate variables. The entrepreneur whose product tanks could obsess over lost revenue, or study why early adopters loved it and mainstream buyers didn't. The athlete who misses the shot could spiral into self-doubt, or analyze whether their stance was off by half an inch. History's most resilient figures shared this trait. They didn't just endure failure, they mined it. J.K. Rowling's 12 publisher rejections for Harry Potter weren't roadblocks. They were editors unknowingly helping her refine the manuscript. Steve Jobs' ousting from Apple wasn't a career ender. It was the wilderness period where he developed Pixar and NeXT, skills that would resurrect Apple later. The common thread, they treated failure like a GPS recalculating the route, not a dead-end sign. Your challenge tonight is simple but transformative. Grab a notebook and divide a page into 3 columns. In the first, describe a recent setback objectively, just the facts, no emotion. In the second, list every variable within your control that influenced the outcome. In the third, write one specific tweak for each variable. This isn't about fixing the past, it's about arming yourself for the next shot. Because the archer who studies the wind's patterns today hits the mark tomorrow, not by chasing perfection, but by embracing the process. The Stoics didn't preach indifference to results, they practiced focus on what builds mastery. When an Olympic diver steps onto the platform, they know the judging isn't in their hands. Their power lies in the hours of drills, the breath before the plunge, the exacting precision of form. That's the mindset to cultivate, not did I win, but did I do all that was mine to do? Because when you separate your worth from the outcome, something unexpected happens. You start failing forward. And that's when the real magic begins. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, once pointed to his ears and mouth with a lesson so simple it stings. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak. That's not just clever wordplay, it's a radical challenge to how we engage with the world. Most conversations today are less about understanding and more about waiting for our turn to talk. We mistake volume for value, confusing the noise we make with the wisdom we hold. But the Stoics saw silence as a superpower, a way to observe deeply, respond precisely, and conserve the energy most people waste on unnecessary words. Think about the last time someone truly listened to you, not the half-hearted nods while they checked their phone, but the kind of attention that made you feel heard down to your bones. That quality of presence is rare because it requires restraint, the discipline to quiet your own thoughts long enough to let another's meaning settle. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself, ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? He wasn't just pruning his speech, he was cultivating space for what mattered. Modern research from Harvard reveals why this matters. The average person interrupts after just 17 seconds of listening. Our brains, trained by social media and sound bites, now treat conversations like competitive sprints rather than collaborative explorations. But here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. The less you rush to fill silence, the more authority your words carry. Consider the courtroom attorney who pauses 10 seconds before cross-examination, or the therapist whose silence invites deeper revelation. Their power comes not from dominating airtime, but from mastering the gaps between words. Your challenge today is deceptively difficult. For 1 full day, practice intentional silence in conversations. Not monastic muteness, but strategic restraint. Before speaking, ask Zeno's 3 questions. Does this need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said now? You'll quickly notice how much of our dialogue is autopilot, habitual opinions, reflexive advice, nervous chatter. The magic happens when you replace those impulses with active listening. Lean in, notice the flicker of emotion in their eyes, hear the unspoken tension beneath their words. Most people are so busy constructing their response that they miss the clues hidden in plain sight. History's greatest negotiators, from Abraham Lincoln to Nelson Mandela, wielded silence like a scalpel. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK's team noted that Soviet Premier Khrushchev's longest pauses often preceded his most critical concessions. The Stoics would have nodded in recognition. They knew that rushed words are like unaimed arrows, while deliberate silence steadies your shot. So try this experiment. In your next conversation, count to 3 after the other person finishes speaking. not the awkward silence of disinterest, but the fertile quiet of digestion. You'll discover something profound. The best responses often arrive after you think you're ready to speak. And when you do break your silence, your words will land with the weight of someone who chooses them carefully. Because true communication isn't about filling the air, it's about creating space for what deserves to be heard. Marcus Aurelius began each dawn with a ritual so simple yet profound it could transform ordinary mornings into sacred space. He gave thanks. Not for fame or fortune, but for the chance to wake up at all. When you arise in the morning, he wrote, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. This wasn't fluffy optimism. For Stoics, gratitude was a razor-sharp tool for cutting through life's illusions, a way to anchor ambition in the fertile soil of the present moment. Consider how easily we overlook the mundane miracles around us, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat, the smell of rain on pavement, the way sunlight filters through a window. The Stoics called this premeditatio bonorum, the deliberate rehearsal of life's ordinary gifts. Seneca practiced it by imagining the loss of his wealth, his status, even his eyesight, not to dwell in fear, but to jolt himself awake to their current presence. Modern science confirms this. UCLA researchers found that people who kept gratitude journals showed 23% higher levels of dopamine, the brain's motivation molecule, than control groups. The lesson, what we take for granted gradually disappears from our emotional landscape. What we pause to notice becomes fuel for joy. Here's where most gratitude practices fall short. They focus on the obvious health, family, career, while ignoring the hidden scaffolding of daily life. The Stoics dug deeper. Epictetus, born into slavery, gave thanks for the ability to interpret his own experiences. Musonius Rufus expressed gratitude for difficult students because they trained his patience. Their genius lay in reframing everything, even challenges, as raw material for appreciation. Try this tonight. Before bed, list 3 ordinary blessings you'd typically overlook: the way your key turns smoothly in the lock, the fact that strangers generally don't steal your parking spot, the quiet moment when your coffee cools to the perfect temperature. Not the grand, sweeping themes of gratitude, but the tiny stitches holding the fabric of your day together. A Stanford study revealed that participants who focused on these subtle details reported higher life satisfaction than those tracking only major events. Why? Because happiness isn't found in rare lightning strikes of fortune, it's woven into the texture of attention. Marcus' morning ritual had a twist most miss. After thanking the universe for another day, he'd add, "And if today is my last, let me meet it with the same gratitude." That's the Stoic edge, using mortality not as a dark cloud, but as a lens that sharpens focus. When chef Anthony Bourdain filmed in Beirut during the 2006 Lebanon War, he described shell-shocked locals sharing meals amid rubble as some of the most grateful people he'd ever met. Adversity had stripped away their assumptions, leaving only the elemental joy of existence. You needn't wait for crisis to access that clarity. Your challenge starts now. Keep a pen by your bedside for 1 week. Each night, name 3 unremarkable things that served you today. Chinese letter that caught you at just the right time. The colleague who handed you a spare charger. The way your old sweater still fits perfectly. Write them not as chores but as discoveries. Over time, you'll notice a shift. The world won't change, but your ability to see its hidden generosity will. Because gratitude, in the Stoic sense, isn't passive appreciation. It's active defiance against the entropy of indifference. And that's where real joy begins, not in having more, but in seeing what's always been there. Seneca saw through the illusion long before modern science confirmed it, that comfort isn't always kindness, and safety can be the slowest form of sabotage. He called luxury soft imprisonment, not because pleasure was evil, but because its seductive embrace could quietly smother growth. Picture a butterfly struggling from its cocoon. The instinct to help, to ease its fight, would actually cripple its wings. Resistance isn't the enemy of transformation, it's the architect. Yet how many of us spend our lives padding the cocoon, mistaking temporary ease for lasting peace? History's most transformative figures understood this tension. Theodore Roosevelt, sickly as a child, deliberately chose the rugged life of a rancher to harden his body and spirit. Marie Curie worked in an unheated shed for 4 years to isolate radium, dismissing comfort as a distraction from discovery. Their achievements weren't accidental, they were forged in the conscious rejection of what Seneca warned against, allowing life's cushions to become cages. Modern research echoes this. A Yale study found that people who consistently chose comfort over challenge showed 40% less cognitive flexibility as they aged. The verdict: stagnation isn't neutral, it's corrosive. Here's where self-deception creeps in. We justify staying in unfulfilling jobs as stability, avoid difficult conversations in the name of keeping peace, or delay creative projects until conditions are perfect. These aren't choices, they're slow surrenders. The Stoics had a remedy: voluntary discomfort, not as punishment, but as vaccination against life's inevitable hardships. Musonius Rufus trained his students to sleep on the ground, eat simple foods, and embrace cold showers, not because poverty was virtuous, but because fragility was dangerous. Your challenge cuts through the noise. Identify one comfort zone you've mistaken for safety. Maybe it's the job you've outgrown but cling to for the title. The relationship you sustain on autopilot, the hobby you've sidelined because there's no time. Now, here's the pivot. Imagine your future self looking back. Not with regret for failures attempted, but for risks untaken. That's the true cost of comfort, not what it gives, but what it quietly steals. Tonight, try this Stoic exercise. Turn off the thermostat 1 degree colder than usual. Skip the dessert. Take the meeting you've been avoiding. Small rebellions against ease train the muscle of courage. Because the person who can tolerate discomfort willingly becomes the one who can endure anything necessary. Luxury isn't the problem, dependency is, and freedom begins when you stop confusing the cage for the nest. Seneca's most piercing work wasn't written for emperors or scholars. It was a wake-up call to his friend Paulinus about time's silent theft. It's not that we have a short time to live, he wrote, but that we waste much of it. 2,000 years later, that truth still stings. We check our phones 150 times a day, lose months to mindless scrolling, and let urgent tasks crowd out what truly matters. But here's the Stoic twist. Time isn't slipping away, we're giving it away. And the first step to reclaiming it isn't more productivity hacks. It's conducting what Seneca would call a time audit, a ruthless accounting of where your most precious resource actually goes. Picture your day as a jar filled with rocks, pebbles, and sand. Most people pour in the sand first: endless emails, social media, trivial errands, until there's no room left for the rocks: deep work, meaningful relationships, personal growth. The Stoic fix: start with the rocks. Track every hour of your next 24 hours like a forensic accountant. Not just worked from 9 to 5, but spent 47 minutes debating a stranger online, or watched 3 back-to-back cooking videos when tired. Brutal honesty reveals invisible leaks. A McKinsey study found executives who tracked their time were stunned to discover 60% of their workweek vanished into meetings about meetings. Here's how to run your audit like a Stoic. Grab a notebook and divide each hour into 3 columns: activity, purpose, and alignment. If you scroll Instagram for 30 minutes, Note whether it was to relax purposeful or procrastinate misaligned. Seneca distinguished between occupied time and own time. One leaves you breathless, the other leaves you richer. Modern tools like Rescue Time or Toggle can automate tracking, but the real magic happens in reflection. At day's end, circle every activity that nourished your growth or relationships in green, drainers in red. The pattern will terrify you, then liberate you. Consider the CEO who discovered her quick morning emails consumed 14 hours weekly, or the artist who realized he spent more time complaining about creative blocks than creating. Time audits don't judge, they illuminate. Like holding a mirror to your life's ledger, they show the gap between what you value and where you invest. Seneca called this living in truth, and it's why his letters urged Paulinus to subtract years lost to empty pursuits from his life's total. You'll see you have fewer years left than you think. He warned not to incite panic, but to spark intention. Tonight, try Seneca's deathbed test. Imagine yourself at life's end reviewing today. Would you smile at how those hours were spent or ache at their frivolity? That's the North Star for realignment, because when you start measuring your days in heartbeats rather than to DOS, everything shifts. The meeting that could have been an email becomes obvious. The someday project demands today's attention. Time stops being something you kill and starts being something you honor. The Stoics didn't leave this to theory. They practiced Memento Mori not as morbid fixation, but as a daily time management tool. Marcus Aurelius would whisper to himself before meetings, "Is this worthy of my last breath?" Not every task needs cosmic significance, but none should be unworthy of your finite existence. Your audit will reveal sacred surprises too, that 20-minute walk where ideas flow. Protect it, the bedtime stories with your child, amplify them. These aren't indulgences, they're the keystones of a life fully lived. So here's your challenge. For the next 24 hours, track with the precision of a scientist studying a rare phenomenon because you are. Not to shame your past choices, but to architect future ones. Because the great irony Seneca uncovered still holds. The people who complain most about life's shortness are often the ones making it shorter. Time isn't the enemy. Waste is, and the moment you start treating minutes like the non-renewable currency they are, you begin the real work of Stoicism, not just contemplating life, but designing it. Anger burns quick and leaves nothing but ashes in its wake. That's the fire the Stoics sought to douse before it could consume reason. Marcus Aurelius, a man who faced betrayals and battlefield chaos daily, scribbled a reminder in his journal that cuts through centuries. How much more harmful are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? Think about that. The insult, the injustice, the frustration, they're fleeting, but the words spoken in rage, the decisions made in fury, those scars linger. Anger isn't a spark, it's a wildfire that burns the hand holding the match. Consider two warriors in the heat of battle. One lets a taunt from the enemy send him charging blindly into a trap. The other takes a breath, adjusts his stance, and turns the provocation into a tactical advantage. Both feel the heat, but only one gets burned. That's the Stoic distinction. Emotions aren't the enemy, but unchecked, they become the architect of self-sabotage. Seneca, who wrote an entire treatise on anger, called it a brief insanity. Modern neuroscience proves him right during bouts of rage. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's rational center, goes offline like a tripped circuit breaker. Here's the exercise Marcus used to cool his temper. When someone offended him, he'd pause and ask, what part of this is truly in my control? Not the other person's words or actions, only his interpretation and response. Picture a sculptor handed a block of marble with cracks running through it. The novice rages at the flawed material. The master studies the fissures and adjusts his chisel strokes accordingly. Life hands us all fractured marble. Anger doesn't smooth the edges, it just shatters the piece further. Your challenge tonight is visceral. Recall a moment this week when anger hijacked you. Maybe a reckless driver cut you off, or a colleague took credit for your idea. Now replay it with Stoic lenses. What if you'd visualized the incident as a test from the universe, designed to strengthen your restraint? What if you'd asked Marcus' question, will this matter in a month? The goal isn't to suppress emotion, but to create space between trigger and reaction, that sacred pause where choice lives. History's most decisive leaders mastered this. When General Grant received cowardly insults from a fellow officer during the Civil War, he didn't duel or demote the man. He wrote a single line in his memoir, "I declined to provoke a quarrel." The insult faded into oblivion. Grant's legacy didn't. That's the hidden calculus of anger. The energy spent fanning its flames is stolen from building something enduring. So next time your pulse quickens, try this. Press your tongue to the roof of your mouth for 3 seconds, a biological trick that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Then hear Seneca's whisper, "No tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many winds blow against it." The gales aren't your enemy, they're the very force that teaches you to stand unbroken. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who ate the same simple meals as his students and slept on a thin mat, had a radical proposition: poverty is a teacher. Not the grinding deprivation of true need, but the deliberate choice to strip away comforts so we remember what truly sustains us. Picture a modern executive leaving their penthouse for a weekend in a bare cabin, no smart devices, no gourmet meals, just the basics. That discomfort isn't punishment, it's a recalibration. Like hitting the reset button on your senses so ordinary pleasures, warm water, fresh fruit, a quiet moment regain their brilliance. This practice, which the Stoics called voluntary hardship, works like a palate cleanser for the soul. When Seneca temporarily lived on bread and water, he wasn't playing at asceticism. He was testing a profound truth. He who has made a fair compact with poverty is rich. Modern science backs this. A Harvard study had participants give up 1 comfort coffee, social media, hot showers for just 48 hours. Afterward, 94% reported heightened appreciation for that very thing. The lesson: abundance isn't about having more, it's about noticing what you already have. Here's how to conduct your own Stoic poverty challenge. First, choose 1 weekend this month to live at 80% of your usual comfort. Sleep on the floor with just a blanket. Turn off all non-essential electronics. Eat simple meals: rice, beans, vegetables with no snacks or stimulants. The goal isn't suffering, it's observation. Notice how your mind rebels against the constraints, then adapts. That first sip of coffee on Monday morning will taste like a revelation. The softness of your bed will feel like a luxury. Musonius took this further. He believed comfort eroded resilience, so he trained his students to embrace cold, hunger, and hard work, not as permanent conditions but as mental vaccinations. Think of it like a vaccine, a tiny, controlled dose of hardship that builds antibodies against future fragility. When tech CEOs like Jack Dorsey do silent retreats or fasting Mondays, they're channeling this same Stoic principle: voluntary discomfort as armor against life's inevitable shocks. Try layering in sensory deprivation to amplify the effect. Spend 2 hours sitting quietly with no distractions, no book, no music, just your thoughts. At first, it's agonizing. Then, like sediment settling in a stirred glass, clarity emerges. The Roman general Scipio Africanus used to wander alone on the beach before dawn, training himself to find solace in solitude. Your modern equivalent might be a phone-free walk in the park where you actually hear birds instead of podcasts. The magic happens in the return. When you reintegrate comforts, they feel chosen rather than habitual. That's the Stoic edge, transforming mindless consumption into intentional appreciation. The entrepreneur who survives on instant noodles for a weekend returns to fresh salads with newfound reverence. The parent who bans toys for 2 days watches their child rediscover the joy of sticks and cardboard boxes. Poverty, practiced temporarily, becomes the whetstone that sharpens gratitude. So mark a weekend on your calendar, pack away the extras, let discomfort be your teacher, because as Musonius taught, the person who knows they can thrive with less carries an unshakable confidence, the kind no market crash or missed paycheck can shake. True wealth isn't in the vault, it's in the freedom of knowing you've already passed life's austerity test. Ambition becomes a prison when it's measured by someone else's ruler. That's the liberating truth Epictetus hammered home when he said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid by the crowd." Think about the weight hidden in that sentence, the permission slip it hands you to stop performing for invisible judges. The expectations we lug around aren't just mental clutter, they're shackles disguised as motivation. The promotion you chase because it's the next logical step, the lifestyle you mimic because it looks successful on Instagram, even the hobbies you force yourself to enjoy because they signal sophistication. These are all borrowed ambitions. And borrowed ambitions come with crushing interest rates. History's most original thinkers shared one trait: they stopped taking society's pop quizzes. Consider Einstein working as a patent clerk, scribbling equations that would rewrite physics while his peers climbed academic ladders. Or Julia Child discovering French cuisine at 37, when women of her era were expected to focus on homemaking. Their breakthroughs didn't come from meeting expectations, they came from burning the rulebook. The Stoics called this autarkeia, self-sufficiency of the soul. Not rebellion for its own sake, but the quiet confidence to build your life on inner metrics rather than external applause. Here's where modern life trips us up. We mistake visibility for validity. If enough people nod at your choices, they must be right. But crowds are terrible compasses, they point toward comfort, not truth. A Stanford study found that when participants were told their opinions aligned with the majority, their brain's reward centers lit up, even if the majority was objectively wrong. That's the seductive danger of expectations. They feel like warmth when they're actually handcuffs. Your liberation starts with a single question: whose dream is this? The novelist who writes pulp because it sells, ignoring the literary novel whispering in her drafts. The lawyer grinding through mergers when he'd rather teach woodworking. Even the gym goer forcing deadlifts because they're hardcore, though yoga lights him up. None of these paths are inherently wrong, but when they're fueled by should rather than want, they drain the vitality from ambition. Epictetus offered a practice for this. Each morning, he'd visualize the criticisms he might face that day, not to dread them, but to disarm them. "You're wasting your time on philosophy," someone might sneer. His rehearsed response: "If you knew what wasting time truly meant, you wouldn't be saying that." That's the armor of conviction, not fighting every critic, but knowing their words can't redefine your purpose. Try this today. Grab a pen and finish the sentence: "I would more if no one were watching." Maybe it's wearing bold colors, pursuing an unconventional career path, or finally quitting the prestigious hobby you secretly hate. Now circle one item and practice what the Stoics called premeditated defiance. Do it conspicuously, not for shock value, but to test a radical hypothesis. The disapproval you fear is often a mirage. The entrepreneur who left Wall Street to start a pie shop found most critics were just projecting their own unrealized dreams. Society's expectations are like old railroad tracks. They indicate where many have gone, but they don't dictate where you must travel. The weight lifts when you realize you were never meant to carry it in the first place. So drop one expectation today, not with a grand announcement, but with the quiet certainty of someone who's finally stopped asking for directions to a destination only they can see. Adversity doesn't just test us, it strips away everything but the truth. Seneca put it bluntly, fire tests gold, suffering tests brave men. Think about that image for a moment. Flames don't create value in metal, they reveal what was already there. The same scalding clarity applies to our lives. When crisis hits, a job loss, an illness, a rupture, the trivial burns away fast. What's left standing isn't your resume or your possessions. It's the handful of people you'd call at 3 a.m., the projects you'd fight to keep alive even if no one paid you. The version of yourself that emerges when the masks can't be maintained. That's the hidden gift of hardship. It forces honesty where comfort allowed pretense. Consider two neighbors hit by the same hurricane. One spends days weeping over a ruined designer sofa. The other, knee-deep in floodwater, realizes they've never felt more alive because they're finally using their EMT training to save lives. The storm didn't change their priorities, it exposed them. Modern psychology calls this post-traumatic growth, but the Stoics knew it centuries ago. Pressure doesn't distort character, it displays it. When entrepreneur Sarah Blakely's first business failed, she didn't mourn the loss. Instead, she noticed something startling. Without the distraction of success, she could finally hear her own instincts whispering about an idea for footless pantyhose. That whisper became Spanx. Here's the exercise that turns theory into revelation. Grab paper and pen. Now imagine this. You have 24 hours before a forced year-long exile. You can't take money or status, just what fits in a single backpack. What makes the cut, not the practical passport, medications, but the essential. The book you've read 7 times, the faded recipe card in your grandmother's handwriting, the playlist that always reminds you who you are. This isn't a packing list, it's a mirror. When novelist Haruki Murakami fled Japan after an earthquake, he took only his running shoes and a notebook. Disaster distilled me, he wrote. I remembered I was a storyteller long before I was a celebrity. Seneca took this further with his premeditation of exile, practicing the loss of comforts to uncover his core. Try it today. Empty one shelf in your home. Not to declutter, but to observe. What do you rush to replace? The photo, the journal, the worn-out sneakers from your first marathon. Those urgency pangs are clues. The items you can't bear to lose aren't valuables, they're bookmarks in the story of who you've become. Now flip the script. Think of a current struggle, a rejection, a financial pinch, a relationship fraying at the edges. Instead of asking, why is this happening? Ask, what is this revealing? The missed promotion might spotlight your real passion outside the office. The dwindling bank account could highlight friendships based on substance rather than rounds of drinks. Even grief, that heaviest of teachers, strips life to its essentials suddenly. Meetings and inboxes seem absurd, while sunlight through hospital windows becomes sacred. That's the Stoic refrain. Adversity isn't an interruption of your path, it's the chisel clearing away excess stone. So tonight, light a candle and do what Seneca did. Let its flame illuminate not just the room, but your hierarchy of truths. Write down 3 things that would still matter if you lost everything else. Not the answers you think you should give, but the ones that make your throat tighten when you imagine their absence. That tightness, that's your gold, and the world will keep sending fire until you recognize its shine. Before the first light touches the sky, Marcus Aurelius would rise, not to conquer the world, but to conquer himself. His mornings weren't about checking notifications or rushing into the day's chaos. They were sacred ground, a quiet battlefield where he fortified his mind before facing the empire's demands. When you arise in the morning, he wrote, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. That's the essence of a Stoic morning ritual, not just waking up, but waking to something, a deliberate alignment of intention before the world's noise intrudes. Modern science confirms what the Stoics knew intuitively. Harvard researchers found that people who start their day with just 5 minutes of intentional focus experience 23% less decision fatigue by afternoon. It's like laying down mental railroad tracks before the train of obligations arrives. Your version of Marcus Dawn ritual doesn't require a philosopher's robes or an imperial villa. It thrives on 3 pillars: stillness, clarity, and wisdom. Begin with the Stoic pause, 5 minutes of silent breathwork, not guided meditation with bells and mantras, but the raw simplicity of observing your own heartbeat. Sit upright, hands on knees, and count inhales to 4, exhales to 6. This isn't about emptying your mind. It's about noticing where your thoughts naturally drift. Are you rehearsing arguments, worrying over unfinished tasks? That's your subconscious showing you where friction lies. The Roman general Scipio Africanus practiced this before battles, using the quiet to spot hidden anxieties that might cloud his judgment. Next, wield the most underrated tool in ambition's arsenal: a single-sentence intention. Marcus' journal often opened with phrases like, "Today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, and arrogance, but I will meet none of these with anything but compassion." Try this template. Today, when predictable challenge arises, I will respond with chosen virtue. For example, when my coworker interrupts me for the 5th time, I'll pause before reacting. Or, if traffic tests my patience, I'll use the delay to listen to an inspiring podcast. Specificity is key. Vague resolutions dissolve by lunch. Now, the wisdom infusion. Keep 2 books by your bedside. One Stoic classic, Aurelius' Meditations, Epictetus in Kyridion, and one biography of someone who embodies resilience. Read 1 page from each, not to memorize but to ignite. When Starbucks founder Howard Schultz was building his empire, he reread passages about Roosevelt's perseverance daily. The goal isn't volume, it's resonance. Let a single line marinate in your mind as you brew coffee or shower. Here's how this looks in practice: a customizable 10-minute ritual. 1. First minute, stand by the window, feel your feet on the floor. Name 3 mundane blessings you'd normally overlook: the hum of the refrigerator, the warmth of socks, the fact that you woke up without an alarm blaring. 2 minutes 2 through 4, breathe with the 4-6 pattern. On the 5th exhale, whisper your intention aloud. 3 minutes 5 through 7, read your Stoic passage. Highlight 1 phrase that prickles, maybe Marcus' reminder that you have power over your mind, not outside events. 4 minutes 8 through 9, flip to your biography. Note 1 action your role model took that you can emulate today, however small. 5 final minute, press your palms together, not in prayer but in physical acknowledgement of the day's contract. You've shown up for yourself, now you're ready to show up for others. The magic lies in consistency, not duration. Naval Ravikant meditates for 60 minutes daily, but he built that habit starting with 60 seconds. What matters is the sequence. Center yourself, set your compass, then borrow courage from those who have walked harder paths. Consider the alternative: waking to a barrage of emails, news alerts, and social comparisons. It's like sprinting into a marathon without stretching. The Stoic morning isn't about adding another task. It's about reclaiming sovereignty before the world starts making demands. As Seneca wrote to Lucilius, "No one is able to rule who has not first learned to obey, and the first master you must serve is your own disciplined mind." Your challenge begins tomorrow. Set your alarm 10 minutes earlier, not to do more, but to be more before doing anything. The emperor who ruled the known world knew this secret. mornings aren't preparation for life. They're the first act of living well. Cicero stood in the grove of an ancient oak, running his fingers over bark weathered by generations of storms, and whispered a truth that would outlive empires. Society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. That image of calloused hands tending saplings for unborn grandchildren captures the essence of legacy thinking. Not monuments etched with your name, but seeds of impact that germinate long after you're gone. The Stoics called this prosoph the disciplined awareness that every choice ripples beyond your lifespan. Modern culture obsesses over quarterly results and viral moments, but real power lies in playing the infinite game where the score isn't tallied until you've left the field. Consider two builders working side by side. One stacks bricks frantically, counting each row as proof of his worth. The other mixes mortar with deliberate care, knowing his foundation must outlast the storms he'll never see. Both are ambitious, but only one understands that true achievement isn't measured in bricks laid, but in walls that shelter future generations. This is the legacy mindset, swapping the intoxication of immediate recognition for the quiet satisfaction of planting orchards others will harvest. When Jonas Salk refused to patent the polio vaccine, forfeiting billions to ensure global access, he wasn't being charitable, he was thinking like a Stoic. The reward wasn't in his bank account, but in the echo of children's laughter in a polio-free world he wouldn't live to witness. So how do we shift from ego-driven success to legacy building? Start with this thought experiment. Fast forward 100 years. Your name has faded from memory, but your influence lingers in ways both visible and invisible. What traces remain? Perhaps it's the scholarship fund that still sends first-generation students to college, or the prototype you designed that evolved into life-saving technology. Maybe it's simply the way your great-grandchildren tell stories about your resilience during hardships, their own challenges softened by the blueprint you left. Legacy isn't about scale, it's about resonance. The teacher whose encouragement still fuels a now elderly student's creativity has built a monument more enduring than any bronze statue. History's master builders understood this. When Michelangelo carved David from a discarded block of marble, he wasn't just solving an artistic challenge, he was conversing with eternity. "I saw the angel in the marble," he said, "and carved until I set him free." That's the Stoics' approach to legacy, revealing what wants to endure through your temporary stewardship. Modern research validates this. A study tracking hospice patients' regrets found a universal theme. They wished they'd focused less on external validation and more on what psychologist Erik Erikson called generativity, the urge to nurture things that outlast the self. Your legacy audit begins with 3 questions. First, what do I want to ripple? Not, how do I want to be remembered? But, what quality or value do I want to amplify in the world? Second, what can only I plant? Beethoven's deafness wasn't just an obstacle, it was the unique soil from which his revolutionary compositions grew. Your perceived limitations might be the very conditions your legacy requires. Third, am I willing to work in the dark? The scientist who discovered the structure of DNA, Rosalind Franklin, died before her contributions were fully recognized. Her notebooks, filled with meticulous research, became the bedrock for others' breakthroughs. Tonight, try this. Light a candle and write 2 letters. The first is to your future self 20 years from now. Describe the world you hope they're living in and your role in creating it. The second is to someone unborn, a descendant or stranger who'll inherit the fragments of your efforts. Tell them what you tried to protect, what you dared to change, and where you fell short. Seal both letters, tuck them away. This isn't an exercise in nostalgia, it's a compass realignment. When you start measuring your days by their echoes rather than their applause, something shifts. The meetings that seemed urgent reveal their triviality. The risks you avoided out of fear become obligations to the future. Marcus Aurelius never saw the meditations he scribbled by lamplight become a cornerstone of Western thought. The physicist Emmy Noether didn't live to see her theorems underpin modern physics. They worked with the faith of gardeners planting sequoias, knowing the shade wouldn't be theirs, but the earth would be richer for it. That's the final test of ambition, not what it extracts from the world for you, but what it deposits in the world through you. So go ahead, dig your hands into the soil of time. The trees you plant today become someone else's oxygen tomorrow. Most people race through life checking off boxes: graduate, land the job, buy the house, hit the retirement number, as if existence were a series of levels to conquer. But the Stoics saw something far more profound in Seneca's declaration. As long as you live, keep learning how to live. That's the difference between finite games, where the point is to win, and the infinite game, where the goal is to keep playing, to keep evolving. Picture two gardeners. One plants annuals, delighting in quick blooms before the season ends. The other cultivates an orchard, knowing they'll never taste the sweetest fruit from trees that outlive them. Both enjoy beauty, but only one is playing the infinite game. This distinction reshapes ambition itself. Finite goals, losing 20 pounds, earning a promotion, saving for a vacation, have their place. They're like rungs on a ladder, providing direction and measurable progress. But fixate too narrowly on these, and you risk becoming the archer Epictetus warned about, so obsessed with hitting the target that you forget why you picked up the bow in the first place. The infinite player, by contrast, measures success differently. For them, mastery isn't a destination. It's the quality of attention they bring to each practice session, each conversation, each failure that teaches them to adjust their grip. Take the violin. A finite player practices until they can perform Beethoven's concerto flawlessly. The infinite player falls in love with the instrument itself, the way rosin dust catches sunlight, the physics of vibrating strings, the endless nuance between notes. They know perfection is a mirage, but progress is eternal. That's why cellist Pablo Casals, at 93, still practiced daily. When asked why, he replied, "Because I think I'm making progress." Your challenge is simple but transformative. Choose one skill not to conquer, but to companion you for life. Maybe it's a language you'll never stop refining, noticing how idioms shift with each generation. Or the art of listening, which deepens like a well the more you draw from it. Even physical pursuits reveal infinite depth. The runner who transitions from chasing PRs to studying biomechanics, then to mentoring younger athletes. The key is to pick something that grows as you do, revealing new layers just when you think you've reached its limits. Seneca's letters reveal how he approached philosophy this way, not as a subject to master, but as a lens that kept sharpening his vision until his final breath. His last act, dictating wisdom to his students as blood filled his lungs. That's the infinite game in its purest form, when even death isn't an end, but the last note in a lifelong symphony of learning. So tonight, ask yourself, what's my orchard? Not the flowers I'll pluck next season, but the trees I'll plant knowing their shade belongs to others. Then pick up the trowel and start digging. The earth is patient, and so is greatness. We've traveled far through the Stoic arsenal, from sharpening perception like a blacksmith tempers steel, to taking action with the precision of an archer releasing their arrow, to fortifying will like a city builds walls against siege. These three tools, how you see, what you do, and the inner fire that keeps you moving, aren't just strategies for surviving adversity. They're the forge where ordinary metal becomes unbreakable. Remember Marcus Aurelius ruling an empire while journaling in candlelight, or Epictetus turning enslavement into a masterclass on freedom. Their power wasn't in controlling the world, but in commanding their response to it. That's the Stoic paradox. The tighter life squeezes, the more leverage you gain if you know where to plant your feet. Consider the ship captain in a storm. She can't calm the waves, but she can adjust the sails. She can't banish the wind, but she can steer by the stars. That's the essence of these teachings. Domination doesn't mean erasing obstacles. It means using them as raw material. Every frustration is a chance to practice patience. Every setback is data for your comeback. Even pain becomes a teacher when you stop resisting its lessons. Now the question isn't whether these tools work. History's proved that. It's which one you'll pick up first. Maybe today you'll try the morning ritual Marcus used to anchor his days. Perhaps you'll test Epictetus' pause, that sacred space between trigger and response when a coworker tests your patience. Or you might channel Seneca's evening review, dissecting the day not with regret but with the curiosity of a scientist studying clues. The key isn't doing all at once, it's starting somewhere. Epictetus leaves us with a blade-sharp truth. No man is free who is not master of himself. That mastery isn't found in grand gestures, but in daily repetitions. The choice to reframe a crisis, the discipline to act despite fear, the grit to love fate even when it wears a frown. So as the screen fades, let this be your first act of command. Pick one practice, just one. Then return to the comments and tell us what's the first obstacle you'll turn into fuel. Because the storm was never your enemy, it was your training ground, and the world needs more warriors who know how to dance in the rain.